there are a variety of people who are doing training, EMS, local hospitals, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. But more importantly, I'd like to offer Dr. Gonzalez my handshake, first of all.
Thank you.
And our Via Christi Health Award, Officer Gonzalez, to the Wichita Police Department in recognition of his quick, life-saving, and heroic efforts that really exemplify what we call Stop the Bleeding. We'll talk a little bit more about that, but I thought you might want to give a few words about what really happened that day.
Thank you. Good morning. So that evening, I remember specifically riding as a 2-officer unit with my partner. En route, we were told that there was a victim that had been shot multiple times. Upon arrival, we were able to locate him in the area, and like the doctor mentioned, I did notice that he was bleeding profusely through one of his legs. As well as being an officer for the Wichita Police Department, I'm also an infantryman for the Kansas Army National Guard. I've gotten extensive training as a combat lifesaver through that as a secondary duty. I also received some pretty good training during the academy. I noticed that the bleeding wasn't stopping. I had a tourniquet on me, and at that point I went in almost like an autopilot type mode where I placed the tourniquet on there and just kind of felt like I was doing my job. I talked to the guy all the way to the hospital and followed him into the OR. This morning I've learned that had I not done that, I guess he would have died. It's just one of those things that I just felt like I was doing my job, and I'm glad that I was there to help, and had the right equipment, the right training, and the right mindset.
Thank you again.
All right, thank you. And also in conjunction to that, this week is Stop the Bleed Week, and here to present the Wichita Police Department with some Stop the Bleed kits is again Dr. Jim Hahn and also Sergeant Lenny Rose and Officer Richard West. If you guys could come up and speak a little bit about these Stop the Bleed kits.
Very good. Thank you again. For those who are not familiar, Stop the Bleed was a concept that started after the Hartford shooting. It was a conglomeration called by the American College of Surgeons and the Committee on Trauma, but it basically included everybody. FBI, national security advisors, fire, police, EMS departments as well. And the idea is, what are we going to do about this? There has to be different tiers, but one of the big problems, if you don't understand how a scene works, a mass casualty scene, but especially a first shooter scene, which is nobody can go in to help until the scene's secured. And that's what actually happened up at Excel, that a lot of the ambulances were physically present, but until they could get the shooter inside that lawnmower factory, they couldn't do anything. If people ran out and got to the ambulance, they could get care. The people in the ambulances cannot go into that facility and try to help them. The same thing obviously happened at Sandy Hook, same problem. So what they discussed is, how do we teach lay people how to give life-saving care? And life-saving care is basically, how do you put on a tourniquet effectively? How do you do deep packing of a wound to stop the bleeding if you're not a doctor, a nurse, and EMS providers? They created this concept, and this basically, now it's unfortunately with all these mass shootings, it's really regimented that we have to get everybody trained. We have to train people and train the trainers. And some of the weaknesses we see is that, one, having the training, and two, having the material. It's not just enough to train people. It doesn't do me any good if I show you how to put on a tourniquet. By the way, I'm not giving you a tourniquet to put on. So looking at that, what we have done in conjunction, obviously, with Officers West and Rose, is to create these kits. We're going to, and under. We're giving out 100 of these Stop the Bleed kits. There are 10 small kits in here, 10 full bags. What they consist of, I'll show you the insides, is basically a series of bandages. These are the idea if you have a deep penetrating wound, and this doesn't have to be mass shootings. We have people industrial, right? We have a lot of aeromedical here. We have farmers. We have car rollovers. We have all sorts of things where you have this deep wound with deep bleeding. You can't just push on the top and hope that that stops. You actually have to get this down into the hole and push and hold with this type of bandage for 10 minutes to try and stop the bleeding. Additionally, and more to what we're talking about, protective equipment. The cat tourniquet that was used, this is the same idea. Can show any lay person. We've been showing it to people in industry, babysitters, the Newton area schools. Our partners have been doing a lot with the Wichita schools. We're trying to get everybody to know how to use this. And ultimately, I would like to see it go all to the level of not just the school nurses and the teachers, students. Right? They're starting up in Newton, that we're starting up with the high school students who are learning how to put on cat tourniquets. The other little bits, there's a safety airway. And what got us in trouble today, a pair of trauma shears to cut off clothing that isn't appropriate in a police station, so we apologize on that part. So you can actually see what's bleeding and apply the tourniquet itself. So hopefully with these additional resources, we can make a difference. The idea of this is proper training, proper equipment, stop the bleed, save a life. I don't know if you folks... Or I'm putting you on the spot. I didn't ask you first. I apologize.
That's okay. I'm Sergeant Lenny Rose. When we were approached by Via Christi in response to helping out with the Stop the Bleed and what we could do, we felt that this was going to be the best way that we can serve the public. Having these kits available, these kits will be in supervisor cars, and then anytime we have a mass casualty incident, like you said, whether it be a mass shooting, natural disaster, vehicle collapse, air crash, whatever it is, we're able to respond, we're able to get there, and we can pass these out to individuals so they can do their own self-care, or to other individuals that can help administer care to those. So the more we have out there in the public that are trained on how to use these, and Via Christi is doing that with the Stop the Bleed program, the better off everybody will be.
I'm Officer Richard West. Fortunately enough, before I came to the Wichita Police Department, I worked in the EMS field, so I have the training behind me. We've been incorporating this into the training academy, teaching the new recruits. We also have classes available for officers just on the street that want to take this class. It's been very successful. Officers do have some of these items available to them on clothing allowance, but with these kits, we'll make more resources available if we should have a large incident. The officers will be trained and ready to provide care if needed. Thank you.
Any questions for Dr. Hahn or the officers that spoke today?
When are these going to be implemented?
They're not. They're physically here. We brought them in with us today.
Right, but when are they going to be?
We'll actually take them today. We'll probably have them dispersed tomorrow to the substations, and they'll be on the supervisors' cars as of tomorrow.
As you were mentioning, Excel shooting a couple years, a couple years ago, had people had these, what would that have done?
I don't know. I actually am up a little bit at night because I feel like to some degree we should have gotten on board faster. Everybody does because all of this surprises us. We're in the middle of Kansas. We can't possibly have a mass shooting, and then we do. And I was on as backup, so I was called in that night. I know for VIA we saw 7, Wesley saw 4. 3 stayed up in Newton when they went into lockdown because they didn't know if it was safe to be leaving the hospital, so they shut everything down and kept 3 of their own. But we had people who died in the field, and I don't know what they died of. I can tell you I saw the people who were hit, and they were hit with assault rifle type weapons. You can bleed to death in 3 to 5 minutes hitting your arm or your leg from an assault rifle. So, and I don't know from an FBI standpoint. I know the people I took care of, and some of them would have benefited from a tourniquet. Thank God they made it, but they didn't make it very well, we'll put it that way. I don't know how many people died in that plant because nobody could throw a tourniquet on it. But this is something, as I said, we're going to industrial areas too. Ultimately, I'd like to pretty much have this everywhere because you think about it, let's say gun violence goes away. It's not going to go away, but we'll say that it does. There's still somebody over at Spirit who has a big piece of metal come in and slice their arm halfway through and they start to bleed to death. It still takes time for EMS to come. There are still going to be farmers that accidentally get their arm pulled into an auger and have their arm ripped off. Same thing. One of these things could save their life because they could very easily bleed to death before I ever see them. Doesn't matter how good my hospital is, anybody other's hospital is, how good the paramedics are. If you already bled to death before the guy shows up, it doesn't matter. And that's kind of the point. And additionally, we're not the only place that does the training. We have to keep in mind this is a system. We're one of the resources. There's a ton of resources. This is a lot of people doing it. It's not here to toot our own horn. It's an idea that we want to have the best trauma system possible because we also have some of the greatest challenges. I used to be in Baltimore, which is people got shot and I got them in 5 minutes. There are people on the western side of the state, they've got to be able to do this too because they have hours to bleed to death before I'm ever going to see them. So it really doesn't matter if you bled to death or almost bled to death. By the time I get you, I can't help you or save you. And that's the point of all of this. So it goes beyond a lot of the rhetoric we have now. It goes beyond all of that to somebody just bleeding to death wherever they are and getting enough time for a paramedic to come take care of you and get you transported to where you need to go.
Can you tell us who provided these kits?
Yes. Oh, I'm sorry. I should have brought that up. I got ahead of myself. Because a lot of these are children-based, Children's Miracle Network had allowed funds, and what we did was created the best balance between what something costs and effectiveness, so we could get as many kits as possible and distribute them. And we've obviously distributed these. We've distributed them out into schools. As I said, those daycare providers that they have large groups, they actually have some of them. So anybody who comes and takes a course gets one of these kits to take home with them. As I said, the training doesn't help you if you don't have the kit to go with it. So, and hopefully we'll get more grant funds and be able to continue doing that. I guess the other thing that just occurs to me now, if you're making your own kit and you go on the internet, since we just did this to try and find something that's cost effective, if it's too good to be true with the tourniquet, because we bought some, it's probably not. Like if you get a full military tourniquet for $8, it's going to be a piece of crap. Don't buy it, because you'll twist it and it'll snap, because we tried it a couple of times. You know, they can be as high as 50 down to 20, down to $15-ish, but if it gets really, really cheap, like we saw 20 tourniquets, you know, $10, don't even order it. It's going to be garbage. And don't use a belt as a tourniquet. It doesn't work. It looks good in movies, but it doesn't work very well.
Did you say, I'm sorry, did you already say how many of these are being?
Oh, so 10 of these bags, each bag has 10 bags in it, so it's 100 kits for the Wichita Police. Up to that, I'm going to pick on Rhonda. How many have we distributed so far otherwise? I don't really know.
About 250.
250, so to other area providers. But we want to give them all away. So
250 kits?
Kits. So this would be another 100, so that put us up to 350. But the idea is to keep getting grant money, keep training. I want to do, a couple people have asked, can I have the kit without the training? Absolutely not. But I'd love to do the training and hand you a kit on the way out.
So all the supervisors have had this type of training?
Yes, and we're doing additional training for a lot of the people who are support personnel in the hospital. They've asked too. You know, everybody who's there, what if we have a mass casualty and we run out of doctors, nurses, and whatever? I've had at least, you know, our cook is at, you know, I'm interested and I can use a tourniquet. Can I do that? Yeah, absolutely. We want all of you to come. That's the whole idea. The more people we have, the more we can respond to a true mass casualty. I guess, and I said that publicly back when, but I'll say it again. It doesn't sound very Christian, but I am really grateful for that person who actually shot that shooter, because I do know from indirectly that he had a duffel bag full of ammo and plenty of weapons. And even though that's a tragedy, we could be talking about 200 people shot, and that could have overwhelmed our system. And that really would have made a huge difference if some of those people knew how to put on a tourniquet and physically had a tourniquet to put on. So we need to be prepared for the worst case scenario.
All right. Appreciate Dr. Jim Hahn and our partners from Via Christi, and also Officer Gonzalez, Sergeant Rose, and Officer West. We continue as a Wichita Police Department to provide quality training and work with our partners such as Via Christi to provide this training with Stop the Bleed, with these Stop the Bleed kits. And Officer Gonzalez is a prime example of that training he has received that he was able to use out in the field to help save a life. So appreciate everybody being here today. Congratulations, Officer Gonzalez, and appreciate Via Christi and their partnership. That's all we have for the Interwatch today, unless there's any last-minute questions.
Do you have any updates on the dog that was injured?
No, still asking for community information. If you have anything, you could share it with Crime Stoppers. We do have a post on Facebook about that incident. Crime Stoppers number 267-2111.
I didn't catch Sergeant Rose's first name.
Lenny, Lenny, right? Lenny.
Thank you.
And I know Dr. Hahn and our partners from Via Christi, Officer Gonzalez, and Sergeant Rose and Officer West will be here if you have any other questions. Okay? All right. Appreciate everybody being here for our Interwatch. Have a great